guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be kicking it off with a video that I don't know, like there was one day I was just kind of like this thought just like randomly came into my mind. Like if someone told me like right now you have 5 minutes to pick 10 palettes you have to declutter, like what palettes would those be? So I should have done this where like I actually filmed like my live reaction where I started a timer. Maybe I'll do that like next year sometime, where I actually like start a 5-minute timer and make myself like look through and pick the palettes. But I picked the 10 palettes currently in my makeup collection that if I absolutely had to choose 10 palettes to declutter, these would be the 10 that I would choose. It does not mean I am decluttering these palettes, but they definitely are top of mind now as I think through if I end up decluttering any more palettes before the end of the year. So if you're interested in which 10 eyeshadow palettes start my makeup collection, I currently would choose to declutter if I had to choose 10. Stay tuned. First, if you have yet to subscribe to my channel and you like project painting content, palette themed content, or just chit-chatting about makeup, I'd love if you'd consider subscribing before moving on. And other than that, let's jump into the video. Okay, you guys. Some of these I don't think will be shocking at all. I don't know if any of these will be like shocking, but some of them I like kind of surprised myself. But let's get this one out of the way first. This is my ABH Sultry palette. It is my current Pan That palette for this year. I'm not going to open it up so that I don't spoil anything for you. But no matter what, I will be decluttering this palette at the end of the year, like literally no matter what. So this was an easy pick for me. I have absolutely loved this palette in its lifetime with me. This has been one of my top favorite palettes in my collection, but I'm just kind of over it, kind of bored with it, and I've used up an incredible amount of this palette. I've used this palette so many times, over 200 times if you include like all the years it's been in my collection. So this would be my choice number 1. Choice number 2, let's go with another like probably not shocking. The Colored Rain Queen of Hearts. This one just always seems to be on the chopping block for me, and while I can't ever seem to get myself to actually declutter this palette, it's just one of my least, I don't even want to say like least favorites in my collection, but the one that I get like least, one of the ones I get least excited to use, or I don't have like any excitement or any motivation to reach for this on a day that I'm like, like I'm not going to use any of my Project Pan palettes or whatever, like let me just like pick a palette. This is never what I'm reaching for. So this would be another one. This one I don't know if it'll be a surprise because during my palette declutter I was kind of hemming and hawing about this one. This is the Vive Cosmetics Muse palette. First of all, this palette is so large, like it is a very large palette. Let me just compare it to the ABH, just so I feel like many people know like the size of the ABH palettes. It's just really big, and I don't find the quality to be like the best eyeshadow quality on the market, and I just don't get super inspired. Like I look into this and I'm like, ugh, I don't feel super inspired to like create a look. I haven't been as into mauve shadows the last like year and a half as I have a mauve shadow look, or a mauve look on my eyes. When I purchased this, I was really into mauves, so it makes sense that I did purchase this, but it's nothing special in my opinion, so I would choose that one as my third palette I would declutter. One that might be a little bit shocking is the ColourPop Going Coconuts. And as I was looking through my collection, I opened this up and I'm like, while this has a very like utilitarian purpose in my collection, like this is a very purposeful palette that I can really use with just about anything, it's just not exciting at all to me to like look at or to create. Like I just simply reach into this from time to time when I feel like I really need a neutral brown. So maybe it's stupid of me to say that this is one of the 10 that I would declutter when it's a nice palette to have around just for those moments you really want a neutral shade. But I also have a lot of brown neutrals throughout my palette collection that I can be reaching for, and I don't think I would miss this palette all that much if I didn't have it. Again, it does have a very purposeful place in my collection. I'm not decluttering these palettes for real, but I did, if I really did have to choose 10, I think I would declutter that one. Another one that might be a little bit of a shock, but the Lawless, the baby one. Now, don't get me wrong, I really do enjoy this eyeshadow palette, but recently I feel like I have found some palettes in my collection or have purchased palettes that have come into my collection that have shades that can make up for the shades that I really love in this palette. So I do really enjoy these two shades right here, but this is just an inner corner highlight for me, and I can get that from many other shades in my collection. I really do love this metallic pink shade, so I would miss that shade quite a bit. I would miss it, but it wouldn't be the end of the world. And then I also really enjoy this dusty mauve shade right here, but I do have some other really beautiful dusty mauve shades that are very similar to this. This is one I'm actually considering potentially just like depotting those 3 shades and decluttering the rest of the palette. That is something that is definitely on my mind, but this is one of the 10 palettes I definitely would decide to declutter if I had to choose 10 out of the collection. As I'm like about to show you guys this one, I'm like, would I actually? I have the Huda Nude Medium, and I think I would. Again, I have no problems with the quality. In fact, the nude line from Huda Beauty I felt like was one of the best. I just don't feel excited about this. Like, it's not an inspiring color story to me. It's older in my collection, and I really do feel like I've reached a point where there's like quite a few palettes in my collection that have been in my collection for quite a while that used to be tippity top favorites, but I've kind of like, whether it be shifted my preferences or they've actually just been in my collection for so many years at this point that I'm just kind of getting bored of some of my older palettes. I feel like this is one of those palettes. Again, this has a lot of purpose. It's very easy to create looks. It's an easy palette to bring with on the go, but I just don't get excited about it. So if I had to choose 10 to declutter, that would be one of them. I also have the ColourPop Stone Cold Fox palette. I am not a huge fan of super large palettes like this. This is really nice to have for a cool toned option, don't get me wrong. There's 30 cool tone shades that I can pick from, but I'm rarely reaching into this palette, so I just don't think that I would miss it all that much if I didn't have it. I thought about going with the ColourPop That's Taupe palette, but sometimes I feel like I'm more inclined to reach for the That's Taupe palette because it is smaller. So ultimately I landed on this one as one of the ones I would really miss the shade Hard Place and Baby Doll. There's some shades I would really miss out of this palette, but you know, I had to make a decision, and this is one that was gonna get the axe. Also, I have the Sigma Untamed palette. This is the 7th palette I would decide to declutter. I don't know if I would miss this. Like, this is fine having this in my collection, but this is not one, again, similar to like the Queen of Hearts palette, it's not one that I'm like, ooh, I want to create a look out of this palette. I feel like the times that I use shades in this palette is because I'm like, it's in a project or I'm trying to reach into a shade. Now, don't get me wrong, I do think there's some really beautiful shades in here. I like the shades Spirit, Envy, Hustle, and Fierce, but I don't think that the mattes are like the best in this. I find them a little bit harder to work with, and I have to spend a little bit more time with this palette. It's also a palette, like a color story, that's just like a little bit more outside of my comfort zone, which is another reason I'm like there's definitely more palettes that I'd rather keep in my collection over this. So that's palette number 8. Palette number 9, I have the Kaleidos Futurism 3 Astro Pink. I was going between this and the Lunar Lavender, and ultimately I decided I was more intrigued by the Lunar Lavender. I just felt more excited about some of the metallic shades in that palette over this palette. It's really like the black and this like fuchsia shade that I'm just like, ugh. If these weren't in this palette, I feel like it wouldn't be as much of an eyesore to me, but I never reach into this palette. I do think that the blue shade and this really beautiful lavender silver shade are absolutely stunning and very beautiful, but I never feel excited to reach into this. I also think I could get really good day-to-day use out of those two shades, but I just never do. So this is one of the ones that I was like, my collection would be okay without that. And then the 10th and final palette I would decide to declutter if I absolutely had to declutter 10 palettes is actually my Natasha Denona Mini Love palette. Now, don't get me wrong, I would really miss this shade right here. I absolutely love this shade as an inner corner highlight. There's a really large pan in this palette because I have used this as an inner corner highlight so many times, but I do have something similar in my Odin's Eye Norns palette. This is like this really beautiful kind of like duochrome pink sort of shade. I absolutely love it. I think I like this one just a little bit more than the Odin's Eye Norns one. However, overall I get more shades in, like, this is only 5 shades, and I would really only be sad about, I would be sad about this one. I do like this matte mauvey purple, but like I would be fine without it. And I also do like this shimmery shade right here, but again, I feel like my collection would be just fine without it. So ultimately I landed on the Natasha Denona Mini Love Palette for my 10th and final palette. I would declutter if I had to choose 10 palettes to declutter right now out of my collection. Now this could change literally any day. Any day you ask me this question, I may choose 10 different palettes, but that is how I am feeling right now. I would love to know in the comments below, what is one palette in your collection you would choose to declutter if you absolutely had to? Let me know if you're surprised by any of my answers to this question, and as mentioned at the introduction, if you have any palette themed content you'd like to see from me, let me know in the comments. Other than that, that is going to wrap it up for today's video. Thank you guys so much for sticking around to watch and for supporting me and my channel as you guys always do. I love you guys so much, and I will catch you in tomorrow's video. Bye.